So tonight, we're here to talk about difficult conversations. This is, I think, one of the most important subjects to cover when it comes to professional development and growth. So I'm very honored to be the first speaker of your class for this semester. Why do we want to talk about difficult conversations, or to use another word or another terminology, conflict resolution, resolving conflicts between people? Why is that important for us to think about, to reflect upon, as you'll be doing for your homework assignments, and to talk about? What do you think? This is interactive, so we'd love to get your feedback as well. Why is it important to talk about these things? There's no wrong answer, just throw it out there.
It helps to problem solve.
It helps to problem solve, yes. What else?
It helps with your problem solving skills.
Yes, it helps with your skills as it relates to problem solving. Why else would this be important to talk about? Communication. It helps your team, teamwork. Yes, all of those are very important. For me, if you don't become at least proficient, semi-proficient, somewhat good at difficult conversations or conflict resolution, in my personal opinion, you are ill-equipped to deal with the world, right? We've got a non-traditional student here with us, someone who's lived some life. Have you ever had to have difficult conversations with people? Plenty. Was it hard at the beginning?
I think so. For me, I just hear a lot of, they look at my gestures. And I look at it and be saying, well, how do I look? But to them, I look a certain assertive, or I'm coming at them a certain type of way.
Right.
On my end, I feel like I'm not. Like, I've really been thrown out of court just sitting there as the person in the audience, and just stopped the whole thing and said, you, I need you to leave. And I said, me? Why? He said, because your gestures. I said, well, I ain't even the person that you talking to. I'm not the plaintiff or the defendant. I'm the person out here. He said, but your gestures just don't look right to me. And he put me out. Well, you know, I was standing outside the window. I was looking in like this.
That was the judge, right, who did that?
The judge put me out.
So you can see how miscommunication, on the other hand, can be a big deal as well. And that can get you in trouble, and figuring out how to get out of that is tricky too. So this skill is extremely important. Let's talk about why conflict happens. For me, it's really three pieces that come together. First one is that you've got high stakes, so the bottom left-hand corner. These high stakes means it's an important thing. You're in a courtroom. You're in a situation where two people or have a marriage situation, or they're not getting along anymore. Something is happening within the context of your work or even personal life where there are very high stakes. Things are important. We care. Everybody cares. The second thing is there are opposing opinions on the upper corner. That means that you all don't see the same way, right? One person sees it one way, the other sees it another way. And finally, the third component is going to be the strong emotions. We can't forget the strong emotions, because that's what kicks it up a notch. That's what makes some situations that would be okay to deal with crucial, critical, and difficult. So here's the false dilemma that we have to avoid. When we get into the situation where we're having a difficult conversation, we have to avoid getting into the conundrum, the difficulty of thinking we either have to be silent and be quiet, or we have to have violence. Now, I'm not talking about necessarily physical violence, but it could be violent words, it could be violent gestures, or gestures that are interpreted to be violent. But it could be that situation where you either feel like I have to turn into a turtle and get in my shell, or you might have the opposite of I got to get out there and fight for my right because I am right about this and I need them to know that. There is another way, and of course we have talked about it briefly. Someone has mentioned it. Helps with conversations, right? The dialogue is that alternative to turning into the turtle or coming out and being the lion. The alternative is dialogue, conversation. Sometimes it can be difficult, and we'll get into why that is in a minute. But I wanted to start off tonight with essentially asking you to understand yourself better. I know you're going to have some reflection activity probably over this coming week, but why not jump into it during our class together and actually talk about what that looks like. So I'm going to hand out what's called a silence or violence quiz. It's very quick and short. It's just 12 true or false questions. So it should go very quickly for you. I want you to complete that now as honestly as you can. All right, then go ahead and turn your sheet over. And what you're going to do is you're going to take a look at this kind of scoring guideline, and it's going to help you to interpret the answers you gave. Essentially what you're doing is, I'll kind of walk you through it if I could borrow yours for a second. You're just going to walk through the questions that you answered, and if you answered true on any of them, you're just going to check the corresponding box. So you can see these withdrawing boxes. There's 2 check boxes for question 1 and question 2. If you said true, you're just going to check the corresponding box. So essentially for all 12 questions, if you answered true to any of them, just check the corresponding box along this column and this column. Is that pretty clear? And once you've done that, if you have 3 or more checks, go ahead and check the silence up top or the violence up top, depending on which one applies. All right. So if there's 3 on the left, you're going to choose silence, check that box. If there are 3 overall boxes on the right, you'll check the violence box. All right. Has everyone completed it? So again, you're taking all your trues, your T that you circled. You're going to go ahead and trace it back to the second page and check off the corresponding T for questions 1 to 12. And then if you happen to have 3 or more, you will check off the silence box if you had 3 or more in withdrawing, avoiding, and masking. And if you had 3 or more under controlling, labeling, or attacking, you would check the violence box as well. All right. This summary sheet kind of gives you an idea of where you stand. All right. So we all kind of have certain initial reactions. We may, for example, withdraw when we talk about issues, where we, again, turn into that turtle like they talked about. We might avoid, where you actually try to change the subject or leave the room. We may mask, where we try to hide it, but we make comments about it, but we try to not really address the situation. We kind of go around it a little bit, okay? On the other column, you've got controlling, where you're trying to actually get back onto the topic so you can drill down and prove that you're right, all right? For labeling, then you start thinking of the other person as a typical such and such. You fill in the blank. Oh, that's so typical of a blank. Stereotype word, right? And then so you start labeling that person as, well, that's just one of a class of person. All those people are like that and they're all terrible, right? Because of course I'm right and they're wrong. The third one is attacking. And that's when you get personal. And again, we're admitting that this is not in our best moments, but maybe in our more difficult moments. Then we lash out and we try to attack the other person. We call them names. We get verbally abusive or maybe physically abusive, whatever the case may be. So those are kind of the 6 categories. So that will give you an indicator of where you tend. Do you tend toward silence or do you tend toward violence? Has this helped anybody? Do you get a sense of where you stand right now by doing this? Does anyone want to share where they are on silence versus violence? Again, there's no right or wrong answer. This is not, we're not, here to judge you. We're just here to chat about different things that go on in life. Anybody want to share? Go ahead. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Jamie again. So I'm in the middle, so I have 4 checks in silence and 4 checks in violence. For me, I can admit the silent part is more when it's academic-wise. If I have to talk to a teacher about something or it's something work-related, I'm kind of quiet. I don't really say much. When it's like me and my boyfriend talking, someone I'm comfortable with, that's when it's kind of like, okay, you're acting stupid, or I'm right, and what is wrong with you, or something. I think when it's more personal, that's when I'm more violent. If I don't really know that person that well, I'm more quiet.
Right. Yeah, and that's good to know about yourself, that you are
Right.
more silent when it comes to strangers or kind of formal situations. And maybe you're more on the violent side when it comes to personal situations. That's good to know about yourself. Again, understanding yourself is important. Anyone else want to share anything that they discovered? All right, well, that exercise gives us at least an understanding of where you might be starting from. But that's not enough. We want to get further than that. We want to understand what are the general modes of conflict that people deal with. Because we want to understand ourselves, but we also need to understand the other party. So that's what I'm going to get into next. This is going to help in both of those areas. Here are 5 of the common ways of looking at conflict modes. This comes from the very famous Thomas Kilmann conflict mode analysis. We've got 2 axes, right? This axis is uncooperative to cooperative on a scale, and then you've also got unassertive to assertive, again on a scale. So looking at the different boxes, if, for example, you are on the cooperative side, but very assertive, you would want to collaborate with the other person, right? You're cooperating, but you also believe in what you're saying. So, hey, let's talk about what you believe and what I believe, because I want to cooperate with you, even though I have some things to say. Now, keeping on the assertive track, say you were assertive but uncooperative. Well, then you're competing. It's all about, I need to get my way, and I'm not going to work with you on it. It has to be my way or the highway. That's right. So those folk who are under the assertive but uncooperative spectrum are going to lean towards that. Let's flip the script and go to unassertive. These are the people who are less wanting to push their ideas out to the front. Let's say you were unassertive but cooperative. You want to work with the person. This is what we call accommodating. And that ends up being the people who give and give and give and give and give, and then at the end of the day they blow up because they've been giving so much they can't give 1 iota more, or, you know. So that's what happens sometimes with folks who always yield, who always give in. Seems like a good strategy at the time, but they pay for it, you know, when they hit their maximum, when they hit their boiling point. Then you've got unassertive but uncooperative. These are the folks who don't want to say what they want to do, but they don't want to work with you either. They are the avoiders. And oftentimes what they end up doing is delaying you, pushing you back. Think about work groups that you've done as an undergraduate. You've had to work with other teams of students. Have you ever met someone who was avoiding? Y'all are trying to get together, make the project happen. You got 5 people. And one of the 5 doesn't say a word during the first meeting. Second meeting, they don't even show up. Somebody got to call them, text them, you know, wrangle them, harass them, drag them in to get them to show up and do anything. These are your avoiders. They don't want to cooperate, and they don't want to assert what they think is right either. Now, interestingly, in the very middle, you've got this compromising. Compromising is where you've got this goal of finding a middle ground, where you're somewhat assertive and you're somewhat cooperative, but you're not all the way there. And so what you end up doing is compromising. That means, okay, you get some of it and I get some of it. Now, do we like compromising? What do you all think? Which of these boxes would be the best box to be in your opinion?
Compromising.
Compromising? Okay, so a lot of you say compromising. I'm sorry, what? Collaborating? Okay. So yeah, definitely the top 2 are compromising and collaborating. I'm now going to give you an example of the difference between the 2. Let's take the example of 2 people and a lemon. There's only 1 lemon in the whole world. There's only 2 people in the whole world. And they both want the lemon. So what do you do? Cut it in half. That's right. Cut that thing in half. You get a half, I get a half. We go our merry way, and we're both oh so happy, right? That's fine and good. But let's say that the next day we come back together, and we say, hey, how are you doing? And they say, hey, how are you? We say, oh, doing great, doing great. How did your half of the lemon work out? And they say, wonderful. How did your half work out? And you say, wonderful. And then you start talking about what you use that lemon for. And the person says, yeah, I use mine because I like to make lemonade. So I squeezed all my juice out and I made some yummy, delicious lemonade. We had just enough for me and my baby girl of 3 years old. We had a great time. And you say, oh, that's weird, because I was using it not for the juice, but just for the rind. Because what I like to do is make lemon zest. You know, when you kind of peel off the covering of the lemon, and you put it in bakery products. You know, you can make lemon bars and that kind of stuff. So they were using it for baking. And then the aha moment comes. What's the aha moment?
You could have gave me the whole man. I could have gave you some.
I could have given you the rest of the juice, and you could have given me the rest of the rind. I would have had twice as much rind, and you would have had twice as much juice. So that is where the difference between compromise and collaborate happens. Compromising sounds really good, but a lot of times it's cutting the lemon in half, which can be a very dangerous proposition. Do you notice how fast we came to the decision to cut that lemon in half? How long did it take? Like, I want to say 0.2 seconds. It was not even 1 second. There are multiple people saying, cut it in half. Sometimes the compromising solution is the easy solution. And I would argue that the easy solution sometimes is not the best solution. Now, by contrast, what did it take for us to get to the point where I understood that I needed the rind and you understood that you needed the juice? What did it take? Communication, right? Conversation, discussion, dialogue. We had to share our ideas. Not just one person saying what they wanted, but both people sharing to be able to get that to happen. And that's what happens when you're collaborating. You're trying to find a win-win. It's not just a win, meaning I get what I want, but it's a win-win. You get what you want, and I get what I want. It's both. How can you make both parties happy? If you kind of live your life that way, your professional career, but also your personal life, if you have that approach, you're going to be far more successful, I guarantee you, than the compromising approach. So I know that's a very simplified example, but I wanted to make it a very stark, very gripping ending, right? It kind of really hits you when you see the difference there, right? So I know that there's a little bit of unrealism here, but I want you to at least see the contrast so you can understand the principle behind it. Is that clear to everybody? All right. So we've talked a little bit about the conflict modes. And now I want to talk about how you create safety when you do communicate. Because we've all now realized, yeah, okay, fine. I give it to you. Communication is good. I want to do it. I'm good with that. Show me how. So let's talk about the show you how piece. You've got to ask yourself, what part of this communication do I own? What part am I responsible for? And what I mean by that is, it has to come from you. You have to get in touch with yourself. Again, I'm going to say some things that sound a little touchy-feely, but that's what it is. It's getting in touch with yourself. It's understanding what part you own, what feelings you own, what attitudes you own, what approach you own. It goes back to saying, you know what, I will admit that I am a competitor. I like to compete. So I own the fact that I'm trying to win too much and I'm not cooperating enough. Or it's, hey, you know what, I have to own that I'm accommodating, that I just give in too easily. And I need to speak up for myself, and I don't do that enough. And I'm going to own that in that conversation. You see, if you don't come from it from your own perspective, you can't have an honest dialogue. So again, you have to know yourself before you can get into that difficult conversation. You have to say to yourself, wow, I was cooperating too much, and I didn't let my partner know, or my boyfriend, or my husband, or my wife, I didn't let him or her know what I really needed, whatever that case may be. I really needed a night out with the girls. And instead of saying that, you said you needed to go watch the football game, and I let you. And part of that is not your fault, it's my fault, because I was playing the accommodating game. And that's my conflict mode, and I need to own it, and I have to come to you and say, I'm sorry I didn't tell you I needed the night out with the girlfriends. I should have told you that earlier, and I didn't. Let's talk about it. Does that make sense? So you see how those two are very different approaches? The admittance of being a competitor means, you know what, I came at you too strong. I didn't even give you a chance to talk. That's the competitor in me, and I need to work on that. Let's talk about how we can do better next time. So again, it's not placing blame or shifting responsibility to another, it's taking responsibility for what you can. Is that clear how those two interoperate, how you can work off of one of the other? So going back to our communication, what part do I own? And I'm going to give you an exercise that I believe could change your life. I know that sounds crazy, but I truly believe it. This one technique can change your life. And I'm going to give you this technique for free or for the low, low cost of what it costs you to enroll in this class right now. Still time to withdraw, by the way. Okay, not a dig on you. But anyway, this is called from you to I statements. What I'm going to ask you to do is translate the following statements from you statements to I statements. How often do we have a situation where we get into conflict with someone and we, instead of approaching it from a me perspective, approach it from a you perspective? Take the very first one. You are wrong. Okay? It can take many forms. It can use different words, whether 5 letters or 4 letters, right? It might not be wrong, but it might be another word you use. How many times do we say you? You're wrong, you got it messed up, whatever. I want you to transform that, given what I've just said, into an I statement. So start with the first one. What would an I statement look like?
I don't agree.
I don't agree. Correct. What else? I'm sorry?
I believe you're wrong.
I believe you're wrong. So let's take I believe you're wrong. That's an interesting one because we have to be careful of, thank you for giving that suggestion. What we have to be careful of is the I statement that actually is a you statement. The I statement that's actually a you statement is I think or I believe, and then you insert a statement about the other person. So thank you for offering it up, but it is actually one that we want to avoid. But it's a good example to have, so thank you for being willing to say that. It's actually one we want to avoid. But again, we're all just learning here, so that's why it's a classroom and not real life. We want to talk about it now in class, so when you get out in the real world, 8:45 p.m., you're going to be equipped for whatever conversation you might have later tonight. So that's what we're talking about. That's why we're in this. It's like a little bubble we get to work on together in a safe environment. And that's what I love about it being an instructor. And I hope that's what you love about it being a student. You can make mistakes and learn on the fly. All right, so go on to the next one. You aren't making any kind of sense.
I don't understand.
I don't understand you.
Or,
So, you
What
still,
else?
I don't.
There still is that you in there.
Yeah, because you was going to come in there.
Well, you don't have to
It's
say
gonna
you. You
come.
can just say I don't understand.
How about I don't understand?
Your next
Good.
sentence is going to be saying you.
Yeah, maybe don't include the you. Just say, I don't understand.
Or you could just say,
I'm not understanding.
I don't comprehend what you're saying.
Yes.
Still saying
And
you.
I'm not saying that you is always wrong. I don't understand what you're saying is perfectly good. That's great.
Can you, without saying I, can you just say, can you repeat that? Or is that trying to be funny? Like, are you being condescending by
Right.
asking them to rephrase what they
Yeah.
just said?
Well, for the purposes of this exercise, I really want you to focus on the I statements. And I think in real life, you also should focus on the I statements. Because I statements are always clean. What I mean by that is, you can always come off clean if you say, this is what I feel and this is what I believe. Because you're entitled to your belief and you're entitled to what you feel. But when you start just kind of throwing things back at people without saying that it's coming from you, it sort of feels like you're taking shots, taking little jabs at them. I would much prefer you just own up to what you are believing and feeling at the moment. I don't understand. I'm confused. I just don't get it. Things of that nature are much more honest, I think, than, can you repeat that? What is that? Say it again? Like that can be confrontational.
Okay.
So I would rather you come up with an I statement. So that's what we're going to do. I'll spend the next couple minutes working through this, and I can do that with you. Let's do the third one. What's the third one, please? Someone throw that out
You
there.
made me so angry.
You make me so angry. What could be a I statement for that?
I said, I feel really bad.
I feel really bad. Good, good, yeah. Mhm.
I am upset.
I'm upset. Yes.
Overwhelmed.
I am overwhelmed.
I was hurt from your actions.
I was hurt from your actions. Again, watch out from the your. If it creeps in too much, just be careful. For the most part, it's okay what I'm hearing, but as a good rule, if you don't put it in at all, then you're totally safe. I know some of this sounds really silly, but it is absolutely true that this stuff works. Because in a difficult conversation, we're not in a nice, air-conditioned, very air-conditioned room where you can just chill out and listen to the waves of the voice and just be like, yeah, kumbaya, this is all good, man. I feel the vibes. You're in a difficult conversation, right? It's heated. The emotions are high. The stakes are high. I don't agree with the person. So when you say something like, that makes me, or I'm very upset, That's much more safe than, you made me angry, or I don't like how you said that, or I believe you're saying things just to get me upset, right? All those things are the opposite way. So when you have those things where the emotions are high, unlike right now in a classroom setting, right? When that's happening, those are the kinds of statements that really shine, that really put the person at ease and make the other person say, okay, they're not coming at me. I can calm down. I can actually listen because they're just talking about themselves. So I'm just going to listen to what they're saying. All right, what's the next one?
That text you sent me was so offensive. Oh, you heard me. I'm going down.
Okay, you hurt me so much you can't do that to me again. What could be an alternative to saying all that?
I am hurt.
I am hurt, yes.
I don't know.
And that's it. All right. What else? How about I don't want that to happen again?
But isn't, how do you say that nicely?
Yeah.
Sound like a manic.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be. What else? What other ideas do we have? I cannot continue to be mistreated. Yeah, that's very good.
Or I was hurt from what happened earlier.
Yes, I was hurt by what happened earlier. Yes, very good. You see how it's clean? I like the word clean because it means I have not used the you at all. It's just the safety mechanism, right? Because you can always let that you creep in there, and it creeps and creeps and creeps, and all of a sudden it is what you do, and that's a problem. So keep it super clean, and you will never have to deal with that. So do you see, can you hear in those statements the difference? Like when I started with the I statement, when I started with the you statement, do you see how it could be interpreted? And then now you hear other people saying I statements. Do you feel the difference in the air, so to speak? Do you feel it?
Yeah, because you
Yeah.
own, like you said, you own.
Right.
Less of accusing someone.
Yes, it's less of accusing. Now, it's not a 100% guarantee, right? It's still a two-way street. The other person can still be a jerk or can still do whatever they're going to do, but at least you've protected yourself, right? You've done the right thing. That's all you can do is control yourself. All right, deep breath. I know this is heavy stuff for a Thursday night. What's next? That text you sent me was so offensive. What could you say as an alternative?
Oh, I said something wrong. I shouldn't have said it.
Okay. Okay, well, what if it was the other person who did something that was offensive? What would you say then? Anything? What do you think? You guys, collectively, we got a lot of heads in here. Let's put our collective brains together. What can we come up with? Yeah, go
I
ahead.
was offended by the message I was sent earlier.
Yes, I was offended by the message that was sent. Didn't have an inkling of you in there. I was offended by the message that was sent. Or, I'm very uncomfortable by the text message I got. Right? It's all me. I. I'm uncomfortable about what I got. Right? Yes, question?
In these conversations, where do you draw the line with like not being self-centered? What about they turn around and say, well, you're making this about you. You haven't. I've avoided saying them, and they could flip it back because I keep saying me.
Yeah. And my,
Say, I'm taking accountability for how I feel and how I'm
Yeah.
allowing you to make you feel.
right. Yeah, I wouldn't even go to the second part. I would just say, I'm just trying to be responsible for me. And I hope you'd be willing to do the same for you. You know, if you want, that would be great. If not, I still got to be accountable for me. That's first and foremost.
It sounds good.
Right? Do you think?
Sounds good.
I'll be honest with you. I mean, I use this in my personal life, and that never comes up. The person never says, you're making it all about you. No, that never happens. It's a struggle. Like, you're struggling. They're struggling with their issues. You're struggling with your issues. And this is just a way to communicate less offensively, to make the playing field at least where the person wants to stay with you and try to make it work out.
And not argue.
Yeah,
No,
it never turns out that, oh, you're talking about you all the time. No one ever does that in my personal experience. It's more just they appreciate that you're not coming at them. Go ahead.
So is this a way to avoid conflict?
Is this a way to avoid conflict?
Yeah, when you're making the I statement.
I would say so. I would say so, depending on how we define it, right? Because we are talking about conflict resolution. But yes, it's a way to, I would say it's a way to avoid conflict in the sense that you're trying to make it so that you both stay at the table and talk. You're making a safe, just like I'm talking about, a safe environment for conversation. That's more what we're talking about than anything else. How can we make it safe? Because if it's not safe, what happens? See ya! I'm going to go lock myself in the man cave and watch TV. Listen, that's me. I'm not talking about him. I'm admitting that that's what I do. Okay? I will go lock myself in the man cave and watch TV instead of talk to my wife and work it out, right? But when we create safety, then maybe the husband doesn't go run off.
Saying, come on now, James, now come on. What you gonna say then?
Well, that's a whole nother conversation. It's a whole nother conversation. And we're talking way too much about me now. I'm getting into my private business. I'm offended. No, I'm kidding. All right, so so we're talking about creating safety, right? When you create that safe environment, those people who are competing, okay, I'm going to admit it, that's me too, are not going to then turn into withdrawers and go run off to the man cave, shut the door, and try to avoid you, right? Because they're not going to be feeling that type of way. They're going to say, you know what, you're treating me with respect, I want to stick around and I want to treat you with respect. Let's see where we can go with this. Because I want to work it out too, right? It's in my best interest to work out whatever issue is. So as long as the field is clean, as long as it's being respectful, I'm going to stick around and see where it can go. Okay? That's what we're trying to do. I hope that's clear enough. Let's go to is there another one there? Oh, the next one is, ask yourself, what kind of you statements do you frequently say? Now this is very important. This is your personal application. Everything else has come out of the mind and thoughts of James Powell, me. I don't want the ideas to come from me. I want them to come from you. Because only you know what you say. This is your opportunity right now. Go ahead and think of what you will typically say when you're in an argument and you want to either win or tell them they're wrong, or what is it that the statement that you say starts with the word you. Go ahead and write that down now. Shouldn't take too long. You should know what you do. You should be like, yeah, I always say this. Oops. So that's what you're going to be. Fill in the blank. What is the oops that you always say? If it doesn't jump out at you, I may recommend that you get a sainthood in the Catholic Church, because, we all are human and we all make mistakes. So the error should jump out at you right away. What do you normally say? Now that you've come up with that, I want you to translate or convert it from the you statement that you just wrote into the new you, the new 2020, better you, the bigger, better you, now that you've been through this class, now that you've gone to this workshop. What are you going to say from January 23rd, 8:45 p.m. on? Translate it from the you to I. Go ahead.
You want the last statement? You talking about the last one?
Yeah, whatever was personal for you, the you statement, turn it back into an I statement. Anybody want to share? I know this is, coming from the heart, but if you want to share, I want to hear. And I'm sure your colleagues would love to learn from your example. Go ahead.
My new statement was, you getting on my last nerves.
You're getting on my last nerves.
And
All
I
right.
changed it to, I am getting really irritated.
I'm getting really irritated. Yes, very good. Anyone else want to share?
I got one.
Go ahead.
For my you statement, it's your fault. For the change me, it was I believe it's not my fault.
So your you statement is, it's your fault, and the change statement is, I believe it's not my fault. Okay. That's not bad.
You always say it's me, and I said I will try to make things better.
So the you statement was, you always say,
Always say
it's me, meaning you always accuse me of
Right.
whatever. And then your I statement
I
is,
will try to make things better. I'll try.
I will try to make things better. Okay, so when you say you always make things about me, to translate into an I statement, I would make it a little different because the I will try to make things better is almost like you're trying to smooth things over. What I want you to do is I want you to take that you always saying it's me, like my fault, it's my fault. How can we help her translate to an I statement? I don't believe it. Go ahead.
Could you repeat it?
Yeah, go ahead. Repeat it, please.
You always saying it's me.
You're always saying it's me.
Saying
We're
it's my
both
fault.
accountable.
Or say, I believe that I'm not the problem.
Wait, that's yours again. So what I'll try to help you. What I would say is, I'm feeling like all the blame is on me. Is that correct? Something like that. Like I believe it's all. I believe everything is on me to get it right. See, that would be an I statement because you're saying, right? So that's kind of, I think, a little bit of more accurate because I don't want you to just say, yeah, I should do better. That's not what we're saying here. We're saying, how can I explain my feelings using I statements? How can I explain the essence of you always blame it on me into an I statement? And the way to do that is to simply say, I'm feeling a lot of pressure. I'm feeling like I got to be the one to change everything. Do you see how that works? Now yours is a little tricky because you said it's your fault, which is a very direct thing. So it's very hard to come up with an I statement. But I think your I statement is about right. Like, I don't believe I did anything wrong.
Right.
You just got to be careful. I would have to hear more of what the conversation was about. But I would challenge you, if you find yourself saying that a lot, I would challenge you to go back to the second step we did and think about your conflict mode and think about what you can own. Remember we had that conversation earlier? What can you own of yours? In addition to the I statements. What can you say, hey, you know what? This is my conflict mode. I admit it. And here's where maybe I could have done some things differently. So that's my challenge to you. And maybe that's your reflection exercises. What can you do differently to get away from ever having to say, it's your fault? How did you get there in the first place, right? So back up a step. All right. I think we've covered this pretty well. Do people feel comfortable with this? Do you feel like it could change your life for real? I want to know if there's any people who think that even one person, just one hand.
Yeah, because you said.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We got
Same
7.
thing.
We got 8 hands.
Try is the big
I'm gonna start dancing. Okay. We got a lot of hands. I need an 8-year-old hand. No 8-year-old hands? Okay, fine. No, it's okay. Too young. It's all good. All right. So that's the I statement that I truly believe can change your life. If that's one thing you learned tonight, your life is transformed. I joke you not. I kid you not. But let's move on to more good stuff because we're not done yet. We got more to learn. I want to talk a little bit about mastering our stories. And when I talk about mastering my stories, I'm talking about an event that happens that, of course, creates conflict that leads to the difficult conversation. There's an event that happens. Whatever. Somebody flips you off when you're driving or cuts you off when you're driving. Someone says something that makes you mad or calls you out during class. Somebody tells you your performance is terrible at work. Whatever the case may be, there is something that happens, and there is a seeing and hearing that happens. That's the first stage. The seeing and hearing is where you observe that the person did in fact move their vehicle in front of you. You heard them honk at you. You heard them attempt to yell at you, but luckily your radio was on, so you didn't hear that part. But you see and hear things. The next thing that happens is you tell a story. And this is where we're focusing on is mastering my stories. What is the story that I'm telling? Now, after I tell myself a story, for example, we're going to use the car example, okay? Because everybody can relate, or most people can relate. They cut you off. The story you tell is, that person is a jerk, or another 4-letter word, right? That person's a jerk, or that person is discourteous. They're very rude. Or that person going way too fast. They're going to get into an accident, and goodness, I hope they get in one. Like, you see what I'm saying? You tell a story about the person. Oh, and even worse, we could get into looking at them and going, okay, well, oh, that's a such and such kind of person, right? Put in your stereotype blank right there. That's why they're driving like that. And that's where we get in trouble too, don't we? Stereotyping. But we tell ourselves a story, and then we feel a certain way, right? So in this example, how do we feel? Mad, irritated, upset, right? And then we act. Oh boy, talk about getting in trouble. Where could we get in trouble in the acting part of this, in my example? Tailgating, honking, doing all kinds of crazy stuff you know you shouldn't be doing. Right? You see what I'm saying? Anybody get into that horrible tailgating situation?
Yes.
Whether you cut off someone or you did the tailgating? Man, it's horrible, right? Afterwards, you're like, who was that? That was not me. What happened? What was I doing? So it all started with telling a story. I'm going to tell you right now, that's the critical piece of this 4-piece analysis right here. This is the danger zone. This is, if you don't watch out, you're going to get hurt. The story you tell is going to dictate the rest of the end of what happens, right? It's going to lead to the tailgating, or it's going to lead to the, oh, bless them, Lord, I hope they drive slower next time, right? It's one or the other. And but how you tell that story is going to affect the end, right? There's a couple ways you can get in trouble telling a story. A lot of ways you can get in trouble. I'm going to tell you the most important ones, the ones that jump out the most, so that you can then avoid doing them. Does that sound good? The first one is taking on the victim mentality. This is when you say, oh, woe is me. Oh, my life. Everybody cuts me off. Not just on the freeway, but in life. I'm the one who always gets cut off. I never get what I want. You see what I'm saying? You get into that victim mentality, start feeling bad, start getting depressed. So that's one of the traps that can happen. Some of these work better with the driving example, some of them not as good. But anyway, you can feel like a victim. So when you start saying, oh man, my life is terrible, woe is me, when something happens, watch out. It's a trap. You know, I've done this. You know, we all do this. This is my daughter. She's my oldest daughter. And she's got a little dragon. And I have a little story to tell about that dragon, just so we can, you know, share. We can share what's really in our hearts. So back before this time, when she was 3 or 4 years old, I would always want to get, at the end of the day, I always want to go and give her a hug and a kiss and tell her good night. And when I would do that, she wouldn't let me hug her. She would say, no, 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 and she would push me away. And I got offended by that. I was like, what's up with the no hugs? What's going on? Like, you don't love me? I'm trying to give you love to end the night. I want it to be a good night. It's not happening. So I got offended, and I was kind of mad about it, and very self-righteous. Well, I'm her father, and I give her everything she needs in the world. She better give me a little hug every night. It's not that hard. And I talked to my wife, and I explained how upset I was. And she said, well, have you thought about why that's happening? I was like, what are you talking about? So she's like, well, have you thought about what might be going on for her? I said, no, why do you ask? And so she simply gave me the understanding that I was telling myself a victim story, saying that woe is me, right? Oh, I'm a victim because my little girl won't give me a hug. Instead of trying to solve the issue and figure out what's going on behind it. And when I started to peel that back and take ownership for my piece, I started to realize that maybe I wasn't having a good relationship with her to start with. And so of course she didn't want to have a hug with me because I hadn't invested in the relationship. I hadn't spent extra time to get to know her, to play with her, to show her I enjoyed her and loved her. And once that happened, and this is where the dragon came in, what I ended up doing was taking her to Build-A-Bear. All right, who can give me a shout out for Build-A-Bear? At least one hand. One hand, thank you. So we got one Build-A-Bear lover. Took her to Build-A-Bear, let her get whatever she wanted. She ended up getting a How to Train Your Dragon. And I said, hey, this is my way of apologizing for the first 3 years of your life. Not exactly in those words. I said, let's start anew, starting today. Let's make today the start of something beautiful. And I promise you, I'll work harder on our relationship. And that's how that, story ended. Of course, just the beginning, right? And so now we get along great. She comes and gives me hugs at night. And, that relationship to an extent, has been restored. How? Not by forcing my way over the other person, but by stepping back and taking ownership of the I. Where's my piece in this? And then starting over, having a chance to start over and say, hey, let's do it right from now on. So that's my story about the victim mentality. Don't fall into the trap of being like, this person isn't doing what I want. Well, there's a reason. Figure out the reason. Don't just keep on forcing your way. The next one is the creepy photo, the villain. You got to watch out that you don't get into this villain approach where you say, oh, the person who cuts me off is obviously a bad person. The person who cut me off is evil. The person who cut me off deserves to ... right? You fill in the blank. I mean, what if that person has a wife in the car who's pregnant and about to give birth, and they're rushing to the hospital, and they just happen to drive a Mercedes or a Jaguar, whatever the case may be. You know what I'm saying, right? Like, what if there really is something going on? You know, I'm kind of joking, right? But what if they really did have an emergency that they had to get to? We can't judge people just because they do an act that is outside of the norm. There may be a reason for that. Even if the reason is they really aren't a very nice person. Again, you have to stop and think, what kind of upbringing did they have? Maybe they didn't have the possibilities I had, right? There's a lot of ways to look at it, but it's a way of not judging other people. So be careful of the villain mentality where once somebody does something to you, a boss, a person on the road, an instructor, a colleague, a classmate, that you don't immediately say, oh, that classmate is rotten. I'm never going to work with her again. Or this or that other person, I don't care for. Watch out, watch out. Watch yourself. That's trouble, okay? The third one is the helpless. This is when you say, gosh, this happened to me, and there is nothing I could do about it, right? There's just nothing to do. There's nothing that should be done. These are the pessimists of our world. The ones who, when you come to them and, you know, want to go do something, they're like, what's the point? Life is going to end for all of us. You're like, whoa, hold on, just calm down. So the helpless mentality will get you in trouble too. And let me take, for example, like a classroom environment. When you feel like you're doing work and you're reading a textbook or going through material and you don't understand it, there can be that sense of wanting to throw that book in the corner and yell and scream and say, this is too hard, I can't do this. I feel helpless, right? But that's not the case. If you stop and think about it, if you really make a list, if you put your mind to it, if you reach out for help, help is there for you. You know, your instructor can help you. Your instructor knows other people who can help you. There's health services here. There's support all around if you just tap into it. So this idea that you're helpless in some area, it's a fallacy, it's a wrong way of thinking. And it will also get you in trouble. Is that pretty clear? Any questions about these three? So now it's time to reflect for you. What clever stories do you tell yourself? Are you more inclined to be A, where, gosh, I'm just a victim, people just beat me up all the time. This is just my life. This is just what it is. Or do you do B? Oh, that person's a dirty, rotten scoundrel. That person's hateful. Or do you go to C? Well, there's nothing I could do about that one. That's just, you know, that's just the way it rolls sometimes. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but I guess it's just losing for me. What do you think? Where do you fall into the trap? What's the trap that gets you the most? C? A and B for you?
I think it's B.
B for you? And C for a lot of people. Okay, how about this side of the room?
C.
C? Yeah. Well, again, go ahead.
I said maybe A.
Maybe A? And again, because of the situation you find yourself as a student, the C is going to come up because of the example I gave. You know, that's a very common feeling of I can't get what I need to get done because of, you know, time, knowledge, etc. So that's a common feeling. And so I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of you felt that. But as you get more into life, you're going to come a lot more up on these as well. So just keep in mind that these are 3 of the biggest traps that I would love for you to live your life avoiding instead of getting trapped in. Let me summarize everything we've talked about, and then I'm going to end. The first thing we talked about was understanding why conflict happens. This was the foundation of everything else we talked about. It's understanding that it comes from those 3 areas, when the emotions are high, when the stakes are high, and the viewpoints are in opposition. And it's very important to understand those 3 factors, okay? Then we understood that the first thing you got to do is avoid that false dilemma. TV shows, movies, they would like to have you think that the only options are just to shut down or to grow violent, because that's just the way the entertainment world is. Very rarely do you see them work it out calmly, because that doesn't bring in people to buy tickets and to see movies and see TV shows. They want gritty, gross, violent, crazy stuff. Man, this is real life. This is not a TV show. This is your life. Avoid the whole shutting down and getting creepy, or the whole, I'm going to fight it out till I win. That's not real life, and it shouldn't be your life. Then we talked about conflict modes. Not just your own and understanding what your conflict mode is, but understanding what other people's conflict modes are. Because when you understand where they're coming from, you may better perceive how to address them. If you see a coworker, for example, always shutting down when you try to approach them, then you know you've got an avoider happening. And then it's up to you to figure out strategies to kind of break open that shell. What do you need to do to be able to reach that person? Or if you see yourself always getting into a combative situation with someone, maybe you realize that their mode is competing, and probably your mode is competing too. No wonder you bump heads, right? So understanding your mode and their mode, when you think of that person you have a conflict with, really helps you to get at the essence of how to approach them with the right strategy. And how to bring your own strategy to play about yourself, how you can change yourself. Next, we had that thing that I'm calling the game changer, right? The thing that could make your life different. It's the I statements. If you do that one thing, I will be very happy, and I think you will too. Change anytime you make a you statement into an I statement in the context of a difficult conversation, not in the extra cool, super duper air-conditioned room of Atkins. But in the moment where it's really hard and your emotions are high, can you find a way to say an I statement and avoid offending the other person? Finally, we talked about the pitfalls, what to avoid. Don't tell yourself clever stories. Get yourself in hot water, talking about stuff you shouldn't because you don't really know, right? Any questions? All right, well, if that's it, then I just want to thank you so much for bringing me here. Really appreciate it. I really enjoyed talking with you. I have a whole series of seminars, not all that I do, but I manage the whole program of Success Workshops, wssu.edu/Success Workshops. Would love for you to come to some other ones if you have the time. Thank you very much.